now proceed to Congressman Steve Cohen of Tennessee, the co-chair of the commission.
Thank you, sir. Any one of you can answer this question. I think I know the answer, but didn't Russia confiscate some assets of American companies, like airplanes and things like that? Mr. Reichler, you're nodding, so you'd respond.
Yes, they did.
So if they took airplanes and they took all kind of properties that American companies had when they decided not to operate in Russia any longer.
Yes, they did.
So
without compensation.
Yeah. Well, that seems like they've kind of set the stage. Do we really need to pass a law to do this? If it's international law, and if it's appropriate that a country take another sovereign's assets for international crimes, which is what's happened here, is it necessary that the Congress pass a law to authorize it, or can the Justice Department just do it on their own volition?
The executive, the president, has the authority to do this without further legislation by Congress. Obviously, the legislation is very important nonetheless, but as a strictly legal matter, this is foreign policy. It's within the discretion and the power of the executive branch, and the president already has the authority under the International Economic Emergency Act of 1977. The same power that authorizes the president to freeze the assets also authorizes the president to transfer them.
Well, I don't think any one of us on the panel have, and we probably should have a better perspective on this than you might, but I'm going to ask you the question. That's the authority I have to ask the question. Why in the hell aren't they doing it? What's holding up Blinken and Biden and Nod?
I wish I could answer that question, Congressman.
Do you have a guess, though?
I'm a lawyer speaking from a legal perspective. There is no doubt that it would be lawful under international law for the administration to do that. It's a policy issue, and that's one of the reasons I think that this legislation is so important, because if Congress expresses its will that these countermeasures, these measures be taken, it may make the difference in encouraging the administration to take the action.
Before I get to Ambassador Freed, do you know of any other country that in Europe or that might have similar interest in helping Ukraine, and why? They all would, but have any of them taken action to confiscate any assets?
Well, we know that the G7 countries and others have frozen Russian state. I think there's almost 20 states that have frozen Russian state assets. Some of them are smaller amounts. I think that to date, no other state has transferred the frozen Russian state assets to Ukraine, but I do know, because my colleagues who are co-signers of our legal memorandum are working in those states, they come from those states, and there are strong tendencies now in some, if not all of those states, to move ahead with the transfers. But as is often the case, they're looking to the United States for leadership.
And they have their parliaments or passed authorizing legislation, or the executives willing to or considering acting on their own?
I think it varies from state to state. I know Canada has passed legislation, although they have very little in the way of Russian state assets there. I can tell you for certain that Canada has passed a law similar, certainly in effect, to the Repo Act. In other states, depending upon their constitutional system, they may or may not need legislative action. It may be possible for them to do it by executive action without further legislation. It would vary from state to state.
Thank you. Ambassador Freed, you were a predecessor of Ambassador Ash, were you not?
I was a predecessor to Ambassador Ash, yes, sir. I knew him well.
Another good ambassador.
Just to add to what Mr. Reichler said, I think the U.S. acting alone wouldn't make enough of a difference because we don't hold many of the Russian assets. The Europeans hold much more. They hold the bulk. Passage of repo would be a sign to the European Union, which is wrestling with this issue, and a sign to key governments like Germany that we were serious. U.S. leadership could help the European Union make a decision about this. So that is certainly an added benefit politically of repo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Congressman Cohen. We now proceed to Senator Richard Bloom.